Alright, your APTA Standard Development Program Recommended Practice American Public Transportation Association 1666K Northwest Washington DC 2006 12-15. Coupler System Periodic Inspection Maintenance. Alright, abstract. The recommended practice to provide for the guidance of periodic inspection maintenance coupler systems mounted in rail transit vehicles. Keywords: coupler, draft gears, dowel bars, link bars, periodic inspection maintenance. Summary: the recommended practice provides guidance for the mechanical, electrical, pneumatic coupling systems used with the coupling rail transit vehicles with manual, automatic, remote power assisted mechanism. Includes emergency release bolts, energy absorbent devices, supporting devices, centering devices, safety lights, guides, yokes, anchorages, draft gears, safety hangers. Provides a useful practice that can be selected and applied with the inspection maintenance process, particularly with the design warrant. Scope and purpose. The document is intended for the use of the rail transit system used as a guide for the developing systematic, comprehensive equipment specific coupler system inspection procedure for the recommended presented, providing guidance established to aid establishment systematic, comprehensive inspection maintenance set procedures using manufacturer recommendations, proven best practice maintenance procedure developed by rail transit systems. Alright, frequency of conduct, requirements, specific tasks, materials, tools, safety, personnel, protective equipment, training requirements, inspection, maintenance, correction, deficiency, reference, definitions, abbreviations, acronyms, summary of change, document history. Okay. Introduction. It's not part of the APTA RPT RP VIM 00602, second revision 2013, recommended practices for coupler system inspection maintenance. The recommended practice for the coupler system periodic inspection maintenance for rail transit vehicles represents a common viewpoint of those parties concerned professional, namely transit operating planning agencies, manufacturer, consultant engineers, group, and general interest groups. The application of any standard of the practice of the guidelines contained herein, voluntary, in some cases federal or state regulations govern portions rail transit system operation. In those cases, the government regulation takes precedent over the standards. The APTA recognizes that certain applications of the standard of the practice include or implement individual rail transit systems may be either more or less restrictive than those given them in the document. The document provides basic maintenance inspection requirements for the coupler system used for the rail transit vehicles. The APTA recommends the use of recommended practices by individual organization maintaining mechanical, electrical, pneumatic coupler system on rail transit vehicles. Individual organization of the contract with others for inspection of these coupler systems, and individual organization influence how these systems are maintained on rail transit vehicles. Are your coupler system periodic inspection and maintenance? Frequency of conduct. Periodic inspection maintenance tasks of the coupler system should be performed on a regular schedule determined by the rail transit system. Frequency as any task contained with recommended practice should comply with all applicable federal, state law, local regulations. Further, in conduct with the rail transit system periodic inspection maintenance program, the frequency of individual tasks may be established based on number of additional factors, including but not limited to OEM recommended intervals, industry experience, operating environmental conditions, historical data, performance requirements, failure analysis, reliability center, maintenance tasks. 2. Requirement-specific tasks. Warning. Ensure that the equipment is secured against uncontrolled movement in accordance with the rail transit system safety practice before commencing any inspection maintenance procedure. Warning. Compressed air with a pressure up to 170 psi can be encountered. Can hazardous when released. Compressed air remains components even when isolated. Be alert in airborne particles and noise. Appropriate eye and face hearing protection mean a minimum of ANSI standards plus other personal protective equipment is approved by the rail transit system shall be worn. Warning, when performing work on a coupler system filed with the rail transit system as safety procedures, same coupling equipment. Some coupling equipment can be remotely activated to ensure all personnel are aware of the clearly endangered and are required. The electric coupler should be associated prior to the inspection while performing certain maintenance activities. Warning, use only those cleaning products, lubricant proven safe, the authorized use by the rail transit system consult and OEM material safety data sheets, references for suitable separate application preventing personal injury or damage of the equipment. Materials, consumables such air filters, O-rings, lubricants will be required. Refer to the operating equipment maintenance specifications. Respect the consumables recommended intervals. 2 tools. In addition, with the standard carried maintenance personnel, the following specialized tools will be required: a go and no-go gauges, profile hooks and gauges, gapping measuring device, spirit level the dial indicators. These gauges are required to determine proper clearance components, determine damming limits, and essential adjusting procedures. Refer to OEM rail transit system practices for specific gauging, measuring requirements, other specialized tools. 2.3. Safety personnel protective equipment. Appropriate personal protective equipment meeting the ANSI standards required by the rail transit system must be worn at all times performance of the inspection maintenance task. 2.4. Training requirements. Rail transit system maintenance contractors should develop the execute training program that provides employee with the knowledge skillful necessary to safely, effectively perform tasks outlined in the recommended practice. 2.5. Inspection and maintenance. In the following procedure, the recommended practice of the operating equipment and maintenance in the RTS maintenance manual should be referred for torque values, condemning limits, clearance measurement, specific procedure methodology. Devices should be clean for proper inspection procedures. Cover over only the visual inspection, gauging, adjustment, functioning test of a coupler system mounted on the rail transit vehicle. Some procedures may require the heavy lifting supporting device due to the size and weight of the equipment. Some procedures require more than one individual. Some procedures will not applicable due to the design variations. Methodology for resolution of deficiencies noted with the inspection, gauging, adjusting, functioning, testing, and coupler system associated devices should be tailored rail transit system in conjunction with the office equipment, operating equipment, maintenance, documentation, inspection, maintenance process. For the interval deficiency resolution, the deficiencies should be done in a comprehensive manner as to create a useful database which will enhance reliability and accountability of the process. 2.5.1. Coupler body assembly, less mechanical, electrical, pneumatic couplers. 1. Inspect the coupler anchorage for the damage of the evidence of the movement of the security of the fastening device. 2. Inspect mounting plate, emergency release screws, nuts, washers, pushing for presence of the condition. 3. Inspect coupler connection to the anchorage. Inspect connecting hinge, pin, bolt, washer, nuts, cotter pins, safety retaining devices, shimming material, retaining hardware, degradation, security of attachment, never reused locking hardware removed from the tail socket. Inspect the degradation of the cylindrical rubber bearing. Inspect all pneumatically hoses, piping connections, evidence leaking on the damage. Inspect freedom of the movement of the coupler and the drawbar anchorage connection. 7. Gauge the hinge, pin, bolt, bushings, and ball socket. Proper clearance of coupler, drawbar, anchor, shim, condemning as required. Inspect anchorage, mounted lateral limited stop bumpers for wear damage security attachment. Inspect ground straps, shunts, integrity, security of attachment. Inspect anchorage, integrity, integrated center mechanism for wear, seal, leakage, damage, security of attachment. Inspect center springs, chains, pins, snap hooks, eye connections. Check for a function. 11. Inspect coupler support assembly for the freedom of the movement and security attachment. Inspect support of the springs for damage, proper resiliency. 12. Lubricate anchorage connection as required. 13. Inspect cutout valve for the evidence leakage. Operate cutout valves to check for ease of use and proper functioning. Lubricate as required. 14. Inspect emergency release bolts, washer presence, security attachment, evidence for the damaged loosening of the inspect safety wire, retaining device presence, and proper application. Notice emergency release bolts should be replaced and set whenever any bolt suspected of being damaged due to the high buff load event should evidence be damaged. 15. Inspect emergency ring witness mark alignment with the evidence for the movement and indication of movement that would warrant removal of physical inspection emergency release bolts. 16. Inspect draft gear elements for signs of movement and deterioration. Inspect security of the plug and yoke nut associated with the pertaining locking device. 17. Inspect the gas hydraulic buffer for signs of damage, leakage, unusual movement of play. 18. Inspect the split ring spring compression with the nut and ring spring move of the damage of the single wear. 19. Inspect the yoke corrosion of the damage of the proper rotational movement and with the security of all associated attachment hardware. Gauge yoke clearance with the coupler assembly housing. Gauge pivot the bushings with the pin bolt as required. Shim lubricate as required. 20. Inspect mechanical coupler head support spring assembly for the sign of damage. Ensure proper resiliency, wear, and check for the normal movement. 21. Inspect radius, radial carrier bar for signs of damage, wear, and security with the mounting hardware and stops. Gauge as required. Lubricate as required. 22. Inspect the spring carrier for signs of damage, wear, proper resilience and function. 23. Inspect the operating center locking device to check the functions, leakage, security of the attachment. 24. Inspect safety, hangover, integrity, security of the attachment. 25. Inspect deformation of tube, signs of damaged dents or ruts or collapse. 26. Inspect coupler, jaws, attached cabling, pneumatic hose piping, other equipment for present security function. 27. Inspect coupler, drawbars, attached pneumatic housing, pneumatic hoses, piping, cable, chain, springs for evidence of fouling, chafing while moving in the normal range of movement. The repair adjust as required. 252. Link bars and drawbars. Inspect the link and drawbar for evidence damage of dents of deformation. 2. Inspect the link bar yoke connections, clearance, proper play, gauge bushing, hinge, pin, bolts as required. Shims as required. Inspect link bar yoke connection with degradation displacement. 4. Inspect all attaching hardware, link bar, drawbar, cabling, pneumatic hose, piping, other equipment in present security function. Inspect all link bar, drawbar, attached pneumatic hose, piping, cabled evidence of fouling and shafting. Repair, adjusting the required, if may be necessary, to move the coupler through its normal operating range to confirm repairs and adjustment. 6. Inspect pneumatic connections and evidence of leakage. 7. Inspect ground strap shunts, integrity, security attachments. 8. Lubricate link bar, yoke, hinge, pin, bolt as required. 9. Inspect drawbar, proper rotational movement. 9. 10. Inspect two-section drawbar security of attachment joining hardware. 11. Inspect gangway support associated hardware security attachment. 12. Inspect safety hanger integrity security of attachment. 13. Inspect pneumatic hose piping cabling attachment car body security of attachment. Proper suspension support. 253. Couplers, mechanical, pneumatic. Gauge coupler with the proper height, but this should be done after after all other coupler checks. Verify with the integrity inspected coupler. Prior to any gauging, adjusting, verify that the car body is proper height. All air springs is equipped with and are functioning woodruff key with the right position, wood coupler face and perpendicular as the operating equipment maintenance. Coupler head rotational horizontal level. Gauge should be done with the coupler assembly line with the center of the vehicle adjusted as required. Inspect mechanical coupler face and throat, hook, link, latch, plate, springs, knuckle, linkage, levers, guide alignment, pins, hinge, pin, bolts, bushings, components with damaged burrs and unusual wear, repair, or replace as required. 3. Inspect all component retaining hardware for wear and security attachment. 4. Gauge coupler face and throat, hook, knuckle, guide, alignment, pins, hinge, bolt, bushings, components using appropriate no and no-go gauges, adjusting condemning required as required. Confirm buffing face, wear plates are in place with inspect conditions with the condemning marks. Lubricate mechanical coupler on the coupling device, remote, automatic, or manual. Other associated components as required. 7. Inspect the front face of the limit with a switch for the security of the attachments. Gauge the plunger tip of the protrusion. Adjust as required to operate the face limit switch. Check for the proper function. Inspect coupler isolation. Switch assembly with the damaged security attachment and operate coupler inspection. Check for the proper functioning. Inspect remote uncoupling device. Check latch plates, linkages, spring pivots over the wear and evidence of leakage. 10. Operate remote uncoupling device. Verify full opening of the coupler, full travel of the release mechanism, ease of the movement, and no binding fouling of the device. 11. Inspect safety of unlock linkage of the damage. Operate coupler and check for the engagement of safety lock, no filing and binding. 12. Inspect the uncoupling cylinder vent choke plug by fouling evidence of slow hatch and latch reset. Clean and replace as required. 13. Inspect uncoupling cylinder of evidence of the damage and seal leakage. 14. Inspect cutout valve with the evidence of leakage. Operate cutoff valve with a test of function. Open drain plug in filter assembly. Drain condensation. Resecure drain plug. 16. Replace air filter gaskets, O-rings as required. Inspect housing connecting evidence for the leakage. 7. Inspect coupler mounted uncoupling solenoid motors, integrity with electrical connections and seals. 18. Operate coupler manual release mechanism. Check for functioning. Very full opening with the coupler, full travel release mechanism, ease of movement, the no binding fouling of the device. Inspect uncoupling cylinder, tappet valve and gasket for a sign of leakage, gauge pin proper protrusion diameter required. Renewal seals, O-rings adjust as required. Inspect drain line air valve tappet pneumatic connection for leaking the damaged gauge pin for proper protrusion as required. Renew seals, O-rings and adjust as required. 21. Inspect mechanical coupler heater for loose wiring and damage test for function. Alright, 254, couplers electric. Inspect electrical coupler housing damage security attachment. And 2. Inspect integrity of security of the attachment electrical cable to cable support for coupler housing, check connection, security chaffing, and cabling of the signs of degradation. 3. Check operate electrical coupler contact cover, check the condition, cover roller, pivots, cams, bearing gasket, spring closure, damage, wear, and proper function. 4. Check operating automatic remote associated electrical coupler doors, check gasket seals, pivot the roller, springs, bearings for damage, where proper movement, that there is no binding and fouling of the device. Check gauge fix with electrical coupler head faces for the proper position relative to the mechanical head just as required. Check for the gauge and movable electrical coupler head faces for the proper position relative to the mechanical head. When in a full forward coupled position, operate the device and inspect the proper movement and no binding of the following. 7. Clean and inspect all coupler contacts, insulation block, inspect wear, discolorization, damage, spring tension. Note, cars should be taken only and approved with cleaning materials procedure as not to damage electrical contact surface. 8. Operate and check manual automatic electrical coupler contact reactors. Check the device for ease, fullness of movement. Check locks, detents, and retracted full forward position. Inspect electrical coupler contact hold open device. Check for functioning. Inspect and test electrical coupler heater function, conditioning of the wiring. 11. Lubricate and electrical coupler associated devices as required. Alright, 255, miscellaneous coupler operation control equipment. Note that the coupler drum switch and the coupler contact block should be blown out using air pressure wand following US OSHA regulations detailed in Title 29 CFR 1910-24-2B. Compressed air used for cleaning purposes. 1. Inspect coupler switch box for evidence pneumatic leakage condition over the gasket cover cams contact surface switches. 2. Manually operate coupler switch box to check for the wear, ease, and fullness of movement and condition of the entire cam surface. Check for pitting, discolorization, evidence of loose wiring or hardware. 3. Remotely operate coupler switch box and check the functioning. 4. Inspect coupler control box, damage evidence, pneumatic leakage, condition, electronic contact switches, solenoids, and valves. 5. Inspect coupler controlling wire, damage insulation, loose overhead, termination, proper distance, removing components, various security of plugs and receptacles when disconnected. Check plugs, receptacles for pushback pins and elements. Inspect electrical components of evidence, overheating, and other damage. Practical manual operating switch valves, solenoids, relays, check the wear and binding. Inspect test adjustment and limited switch relays off operating equipment maintenance recommended intervals. Perform operational test coupler control box. Check for proper functioning of the mechanical coupler, electrical coupler, pneumatic coupler, tablet valve, center locking, centering devices, coupler switch box, isolating valve switch. Alright, 256, your towing adapters. Inspect damage and corrosion. Confirm locking device hardware operates easily. Repair and clean as necessary. Gauge coupler interface feature. Check for distortion wear beyond limits. If equipped with forum usage, instruction labels are applied in accordance with the office OEM manuals and are readable. Alright, 26. Correction deficiencies. Alright, 26. Any correction deficiencies and deficiencies uncovered during the inspection, section 251 to 256, shall be corrected and documented in accordance with the established rail transit system procedure OEM recommendations. 3. Code Federal Regulation, Title 29 CFR 1910-242, compressed air use cleaning purposes. 4. Your anchor the component with the interface for the coupler assembly to the vehicle, the container with the main pivot, the bearing with the pivot, the pin with the resilient coupler assembly support frame is attached for the pivot, the pin self-supporting coupler designs may also contain centering system secondary collision release feature. Buffer, a spring assembly gas hydraulic self-resetting energy absorbent device, crush cartridge assembly, or series elastometric elements such as a coupler assembly which can absorb the high impact coupling of the surface of buff loads. Centering device, a device that prevents limits of free of the uncoupled the coupler assembly for the moving it into the normal lateral range. Coupler uncontrol box and panel device for the command of the signals generated by the initiate of the coupling over the uncoupling surface sequence of the isolation connection and electrical train line circuits. Coupler equipment, a mechanical device mounted with a mechanical coupler assembly that makes the electrical circuit connection between the rail transit vehicle through the series of mating contacts. Coupler mechanical device that is part of the coupler assembly that makes a physical connection between the rail and the transit vehicle that consists of a faceplate, alignment pins, matching holes to mate with the like of the device with another rail transit vehicle, also known as mechanical coupler head. Coupler pneumatic, a self-sealing valve assembly mounted under the coupler assembly that allows the air pressure equalization between the coupled rail vehicles. Coupler switch box, a termination point electrical circuits for the electrical coupler heads, also known as a jumper drum switch. Coupler system and assembly, a mechanical device optional or consisting of mechanical coupler, electrical coupler, pneumatic coupler, draft yoke, and impact energy absorber. Deformation tube, a two-section tube that is part of the coupler assembly which unusually serves the impact collapse of the other dissipation energy momentum, acts as an energy absorbent device and is not repairable but must be replaced when activated. Draft gear, the device enclosed with the coupler assembly with the transmit with the draft and buff loads with the car body, draw bar of the metal bar to tube connected directly with the anchorage casting with the connecting the rail transit vehicle together with the option for the uncoupling device. This device normally has a draft gear. Emergency release of ring plate in the metal section encased with the coupler assembly within which the shear tension of the bolts are threaded. Emergency release and tension bolt of the threaded device if it disengages the brake under the specified load with the subject of the surface of buff loads as a result of the collision or other causes, also known as shear pin and bolts. Energy absorbent cylinders of the device used with the coupler assembly that absorb high impact coupling with the self-severe buff loads and self-resetting. Link bar, a metal bar tube that used in connecting rail transit vehicle together, generally connected to the coupler of the yokes of the cars that connects the replacing respective mechanical coupler, is not equipped with a quick release device for their uncoupling. Radius and radial carrier bar, a flat steel bar mounted with the underside of the vehicle with the support of the coupler assembly with the end opposite of the anchorage connection, allows full lateral movement within the coupler's normal range. Towing adapter device used with the interface transit coupler, additional knuckler couplers to transit coupler to coupling configuration used for towing and rescuing transit vehicles. Your yoke, a mechanical articulation connection as part of the coupler assembly that allows the normal limit of the movement of the vertical plane, horizontal plane rotation, about longitudinal axis to compensate for natural varied orientation coupled to rail transit vehicles in motion. ASI stands for American National Standard Institution. CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulation. MSDS stands for Material Safety Data Sheets. OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. OSHA Occupational Safety Health Administration. PSI pounds per square inch. RTS Rail Transit System. Summary of documentation and document history. Alright, that was your coupler system periodic inspection and maintenance.